They were so pale. Some of us believed they were messengers of the gods.
The Aztec Empire was even more terrifying than the history books tell us. Forget what you know about their legendary temples and fierce warriors. Cutting-edge DNA science has just solved the mystery of their true identity, and the reality is beyond disturbing. We're talking about a level of genetic manipulation that seems almost modern.
Just imagine that a colony who built their entire city for their good life suddenly vanish.
The evidence points to entire civilizations being systematically wiped from the gene pool and replaced. This genetic bombshell proves the Aztecs weren't just conquerors, they were demographic engineers on an unimaginable scale with a much darker legacy than previously thought. The first DNA bombshell. The bombshell discovery happened at a site called Xaltocan. Before the Aztecs dominated the region, Xaltocan was a thriving capital for the Otomi people, a sophisticated culture that had lived in the Valley of Mexico for hundreds of years. They had their own language, government, and traditions. Then the Aztecs expanded their empire, and what happened next has been a massive puzzle for historians. The Otomi people seemingly vanished from the historical record. Poof, gone. For a long time, experts figured they either mixed in with the Aztecs peacefully or simply packed up and moved away to avoid trouble. Both ideas sound reasonable, but the truth hidden in their genetic code was far more sinister. When scientists from the University of Texas finally managed to analyze DNA from skeletons buried in Xaltocan, they uncovered something that sent a chill down the spine of the academic world. The DNA from before the Aztec conquest showed a clear, distinct genetic signature belonging to the Otomi. But in the skeletons from after the Aztec takeover, that signature was almost completely gone. In its place was the DNA of people from hundreds of miles away. This wasn't a gradual mixing of people over generations. What the data showed was a wholesale population replacement. It was as if the original inhabitants had been completely swapped out. What many overlooked for years was now glaringly obvious in the genetic data. This wasn't just conquest. To put it mildly, this was a demographic disappearing act. This finding was staggering. Imagine if a new power took over your city and within a generation, genetic tests showed that the entire population had a completely different ancestry. That's the scale of what happened in Xaltocan. And this discovery was just the beginning. As researchers began testing remains from other sites across central Mexico, a disturbing pattern started to emerge. City after city showed the same eerie genetic shift. The original local populations, with their unique genetic markers, were systematically replaced by people with different DNA. This wasn't just a side effect of war, it suggested a deliberate and organized strategy. The implications were huge and unsettling, pointing to a form of empire building far more extreme than anyone had ever imagined. The Aztecs, it turned out, didn't just conquer lands, they repopulated them. The evidence now suggests they were masters of demographic engineering, a coalition of conquerors. The mystery deepens when you look at the genetic makeup of the Aztecs themselves. The traditional story of a single tribe marching south from Aztlan implies a relatively uniform genetic profile. But the thing nobody tells you is that the DNA of modern Aztec descendants is incredibly diverse, far more than you'd expect from one founding group. Geneticists have identified a massive array of different genetic markers, known as haplogroups. We're talking about specific Y chromosome signatures like QME-H2, QM3, and QPV3. These aren't just random letters and numbers. They are genetic breadcrumbs that trace the paths of different ancient peoples moving across the Americas. This enormous diversity suggests something revolutionary. The Aztecs were not a single ethnic group at all. Instead, it seems they were a complex coalition of various peoples, a powerful alliance with different genetic backgrounds that came together to form the empire. This completely changes our understanding of who they were. They weren't just one tribe that got powerful. They were a multi-ethnic force that absorbed or replaced others. And you can see this everywhere in the genetic data. The scale of this mixing and movement indicates that the Aztec expansion wasn't just a military campaign. It triggered one of the largest and fastest population shifts in pre-Columbian American history. What many overlooked is how these population movements were not random. The genetic evidence shows that as the empire expanded, specific genetic markers associated with the Aztec heartland and their allies began appearing in conquered lands while the local markers vanished. This points to a highly organized system. Some researchers now call it genetic colonization. It's a chilling term, but it fits the evidence. The Aztecs were seemingly moving huge numbers of their own people into newly acquired territories. Think about the logistics of that. We're talking about coordinating the relocation of tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of people across hundreds of miles of rough terrain. This would require a level of central planning and administrative power that rivals modern states. The most shocking fact is that this genetic engineering had a clear purpose: to solidify control. By replacing local populations with loyal subjects, the Aztecs could erase old loyalties and reduce the risk of rebellion. It was a brutal but incredibly effective way to build a stable empire. This wasn't just about collecting tribute, it was about fundamentally reshaping the human landscape of Mesoamerica. They weren't just building an empire of subjects, they were building an empire of their own people, one city at a time, on top of the genetic ghosts of those who came before. This reveals a level of sophistication and ruthlessness that changes everything. Engineering a civilization. So what actually happened to the millions of original inhabitants? The DNA evidence points to a few grim possibilities, none of them good. The first is forced relocation. It's likely that many communities were uprooted and moved to other parts of the empire, scattered to break their social cohesion and prevent them from organizing any resistance. Imagine entire towns being forced to march hundreds of miles to a new, unfamiliar land. This was a common tactic in other ancient empires like the Assyrians, but the genetic data suggests the Aztecs perfected it on a massive scale. However, there's a darker possibility that researchers are now forced to confront. The data doesn't just show population replacement, it shows the complete disappearance of certain genetic lines. Recent studies on Y chromosome diversity have found that specific paternal lineages that were common in certain regions before the Aztecs arrived are now completely gone from modern descendants. It's as if entire family trees were pruned from the human record forever. This pattern of missing lineages isn't random. It's concentrated in areas that were strategically important to the Aztec Empire. This leads to an unsettling conclusion. Some populations may not have been moved at all. They may have been systematically eliminated. The mechanics of this demographic reshaping remain a topic of intense debate. How could they achieve such a complete genetic turnover so quickly? The evidence suggests a multi-pronged strategy. First, military conquest would remove the existing power structure. Then, a wave of new settlers loyal to the empire would be moved in to take over the land, workshops, and homes. To put it mildly, this was a full-scale takeover. Local men of fighting age were likely the first to be removed from the equation, either in battle or through other means, which would explain the disappearance of those paternal Y chromosome lines. The thing is, many people watching this are probably wondering if all this happened overnight. The DNA suggests these changes happened shockingly fast, often within just a few decades of a region being conquered. This rapid transformation implies a deliberate state-sponsored policy. The Aztecs weren't just letting events unfold, they were actively managing the populations of their territories with a terrifying degree of precision. Are we missing a key detail? The evidence is in the genes. This was a calculated, systematic effort to secure their empire by fundamentally altering the very identity of the people within it. Their empire was built not just on stone, but on a foundation of erased DNA. Secrets in our cells. These groundbreaking discoveries are forcing a total rewrite of Mesoamerican history. For generations, the Aztecs have been seen as just one of many powerful empires throughout history. Skilled warriors, brilliant engineers, but ultimately following a familiar playbook of conquest and tribute. Now, the genetic evidence reveals them to be something far more unique and frankly more modern in their methods. They weren't just conquerors, they were demographic strategists. This fundamentally changes their legacy from being a regional power to being innovators of a kind of social control previously thought impossible for the era. This revelation has sparked a firestorm of debate among historians and archaeologists. Is conquest even the right word for what they did? Some scholars are now arguing that demographic colonization or genetic imperialism are more accurate descriptions. This isn't just a matter of semantics, it changes how we view the power dynamics of the pre-Columbian world. It also raises uncomfortable questions about other ancient empires. If the Aztecs were doing this, who else was? We are now looking at history through a new lens, one that can see the silent genetic shadows of imperial ambition. DNA analysis is now being planned for Roman, Persian, and Mayan sites to see if similar patterns exist. Of course, huge mysteries remain. The biggest question is about the fate of the displaced. If millions were relocated, where did they go? So far, we haven't found a genetic refugee signature in other parts of Mexico that matches the vanished peoples. The logistics also remain baffling. How did the Aztecs manage to move and support such massive numbers of people? The archaeological record doesn't show us the full picture of the roads, supply depots, and administrative machine that would have been necessary. The DNA gives us the shocking outcome, but not the full blueprint of how they achieved it. Ultimately, this story is a powerful reminder that history is never truly settled. A tiny fragment of bone, combined with incredible technology, can upend centuries of accepted knowledge. People looking for a mystery are finding one written in our very cells. The truth of the Aztecs is far more complex and darker than we ever knew. It's a story of incredible achievement intertwined with a chillingly effective strategy of population control. We are just at the beginning of this genetic revolution in history. What other secrets are waiting to be unlocked from the DNA of our ancestors? The thing is, we may never know the full story. Whispers of a grand design. The revelations from Xaltocan and beyond force us to look deeper, to peel back the layers of established history and confront a truly unsettling possibility. What if the Aztecs' demographic engineering wasn't merely a brutal strategy for control, but part of a grander, more audacious design? The sheer scale and speed of the genetic shifts suggest an intent far beyond simple military occupation. This wasn't just about ensuring loyalty, it was about forging a new kind of civilization, one built on a genetically curated foundation. Consider the genetic colonization in a new light. If the Aztecs were indeed a diverse coalition, as their own genetic makeup suggests, then their expansion might have been more than just territorial. It could have been an experiment in social and biological integration on an unprecedented scale. Was their goal to create a unified Aztec people, not just culturally, but genetically? By systematically replacing local populations with their own diverse coalition members, they could have been attempting to homogenize the gene pool of their empire, creating a super identity that transcended the original ethnic distinctions of their constituent tribes. This would be less about wiping out specific groups and more about absorbing and transforming them into a new, centrally defined entity. Perhaps the missing lineages aren't just vanished, but diluted beyond recognition within this engineered melting pot. Their unique markers submerged by the incoming tide of diverse Aztec haplogroups. But the wilder theories truly emerge when we consider the ruthlessness of this process. The disappearance of specific paternal Y chromosome lines in strategically important areas before the Aztec arrival is particularly chilling. If these men were systematically eliminated, it suggests a deliberate pruning of the genetic tree, not just a reshuffling. This wasn't merely about land or resources, it was about ensuring that future generations in these critical regions bore the genetic imprint of the empire. Could this be an early, brutal form of eugenics, an attempt to optimize the population for loyalty, obedience, or even specific labor roles within the vast Aztec system? The idea of an ancient empire engaging in such sophisticated genetic selection seems almost anachronistic, yet the data compels us to consider it. What if the Aztecs possessed a deeper, esoteric understanding of heredity than we give them credit for? Not a scientific understanding in the modern sense, but perhaps a ritualistic or spiritual one. Ancient cultures often revered bloodlines and ancestry. Could their priests and rulers have developed a theological framework that justified, even commanded, the reshaping of populations based on perceived genetic purity or suitability for the empire's grand purpose? Imagine a secret order, tracking lineages and directing these demographic shifts based on celestial alignments or ancient prophecies. This would elevate the demographic strategist to something more akin to genetic architects, guiding the biological destiny of their burgeoning empire. The logistical puzzle of moving hundreds of thousands of people also hints at an extraordinary level of foresight and planning, potentially bordering on obsession. Such an undertaking would require not just military might, but an intricate network of roads, way stations, and administrative centers capable of sustaining and guiding these mass migrations. We have archaeological evidence of Aztec infrastructure, but perhaps we've been underestimating its true purpose and scale. The secrets of the past are buried deeper than we think. This story makes you wonder, how much of our own history is a carefully constructed narrative, not the whole truth? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And for more secrets uncovered by science, don't forget to like and subscribe.